This is Misspend, the Atari 8-bit podcast.
If I think about one thing that really captures that era is that it was exciting. It was exciting. It was fun. It was something new. It was something you could share. You could join a user group. There were all these magazines. A lot of information out there. A lot of stuff to learn. A lot of stuff to have fun with and share.
This is an interview episode of Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast. I'm Kevin Savitz. Arthur Leyenberger wrote the Outpost Atari column in Creative Computing magazine, the End User column in Analog Computing, and the ST User column in ST.Log magazine. He was also editor of the Jersey Atari Computer Group newsletter. This interview took place on November 10th, 2015.
In the late 70s, I was working for a time-sharing company. This is back in the days when people didn't have personal computers. Well, they were just starting to have things like Altairs and microcomputers like that. But basically, businesses use computers, and they used a time-sharing outfit where they rented the time. They paid by the CPU cycle, and they paid for storage. So I was working for this time-sharing company and was very interested in this whole brand-new microcomputer scene. I had been an electronics hobbyist since I was a kid. I used to build radios and amplifiers and things like that. So I was definitely into electronics. And I remember, I don't know what year it was, it may have been late 70s, I went to one of the first computer fairs in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And they were the Altairs. They were ready-made things like, I think Sol was one of the companies, and I'm not sure I remember too many other ones, but I do remember seeing Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak with their original Apple at that computer fair. Anyway, I was interested, but I never took the plunge, and I'm not sure why, but I never did. And then in about 1980, I joined Bell Laboratories, and I learned that there was an Atari user group at Bell Labs. In fact, it was the Jersey Atari Computer Group. So I went to one of their meetings, and first of all, there must have been a couple hundred people there at the meeting. They had computers set up showing different kinds of software. They had demonstrations. It was in a big auditorium. They had demos on stage, and I got hooked. So I soon went out and bought, and I never did things in a small way. So I went out, I bought an Atari 800, I bought 2 disk drives, I bought the interface, the 850 interface, and I bought, I think it was an Epson MX80, I don't know why I remember that, but an MX80 dot matrix printer. So I bought all this stuff, brought it home, started playing around, bought a lot of software, bought some games, bought some application software, as we would call it today, and really got into it. And I joined the user group. I volunteered to be the newsletter editor of the user group, so I started writing reviews of games and software and hardware and this and that. And the way that I ended up at Creative Computing was Creative Computing was published out of Morristown, New Jersey. David All and Betsy Staples were the main driving forces. And I had been reading Creative since it first started, years before. So John Anderson, who was at Creative at the time, he was going to give a demonstration of the Atari computer at NYU in New York City, and he couldn't make it. It was I think it was on a Saturday, an all-day seminar. And he called up the user group, talked to the president, said, "Hey, I can't do this. Can you do this?" And they said no. He said, the president said no. No, just the guy who can do it. And so he mentioned it to me. I said, sure, I'll do it. That's fine. So I did it. It was a lot of fun. It went over very, very well. And that's how I got my connection to creative computing in the beginning.
Nice.
I told you it was a long and winding road.
No, that was less than 5 minutes. That's I've had much longer windier roads. All right, so you're editing this this newsletter for the Jersey Atari Computer Group, and then you got connected to Dave over at Creative with the demo. So, at some point you started writing for Creative, and then can you tell me how that came about? I mean, as I understand it, you can tell me if I'm wrong. The first Outpost Atari columnist was Dave Small, and then it went to John Anderson, who we talked about, and then somehow it got passed from John to you.
That's right. So actually, and you probably know this, it wasn't just David Small that wrote the Atari Outpost Atari column. He was always billed as David and Sandy Small. Right. So yes, he was the first columnist at Creative for the Atari computer. John, I don't know. I think David Small left to do some independent work, and I think he ended up doing some software. I can't.
Yeah, he had a hardware
remember,
company.
but
I interviewed him. We talked for a couple hours. He.
Great.
If you want to know, we know all about what Dave did.
Right. So anyway, so he left. John took it over, and then at the same time that John took it over for I don't know how many months he had it. I was thinking to myself, I'm spending all this time writing reviews of hardware and software, and I had multiple columns and all that kind of stuff, and I was really into it. I knew about hardware and software. I thought, well, maybe I could do this, for a real magazine. So that's when I approached John, and he said, well, write something, and if we like it, we'll publish it, and we'll go from there. So I think the very first thing that I ever wrote for creative computing was, I may be wrong, but I think the first thing was a bunch of game reviews. And I called it A Gaggle of Games. And I just reviewed what I thought were, at the time, the best Atari games that are out there from whatever vendor, whatever software company. And Atari liked it, or Creative Computing liked it. And John said, well, would you like to write the column? I said, sure. So that's how that came about.
Nice. According to what I could find, and this is by no means 100% accurate, the first thing that ran by you in creative computing was a review of Atari Writer, which was in October 1983. The Gaggle of Games thing was, you may have written it before, but it was published in January 1984. And your first.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I know they held on to things for months.
That was 30 years ago.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I don't. I'm just looking at what I have, which may not be.
Okay.
Yeah, and your first Outpost Atari column was November 1983.
Okay. November 82?
83. November 83.
83. Okay. So that seems about right. I bought my Atari 800 somewhere around late, I think it was the fall of 80 or so.
How old were you at the time about? Because, I mean, when you threw down, you must have thrown down a ton of cash for the 2 disk drives and...
Oh, yeah, I was actually, I made, thinking about talking to you, I made some notes to myself. And, again, this is from memory. I wasn't at the very beginning of the Atari computers, but I was pretty close to the beginning. So I'm just looking at my little list here. So I bought an Atari 800 with 16K, $799. I bought 2 810 disk drives, and that must have been, I think they were about $350 or $400 a piece. They were very expensive. The 850 interface was about $200. Oh, I forgot to mention, I bought a Commodore 1702 monitor had to have a good monitor. The Epson printer was a couple $100, and of course I bought 32K memory for another $400. So I spent close to $3,000 on my Atari system, and I went out and did a little Google search, did the old, what money's worth inflation index thing. So in 1981-ish, $3,000 is worth about $7,600 today. So when you think about that, and I'm sure you have, and I'm sure a lot of people you talk to and people that you know, you don't have to spend anywhere near $7,600 today to get a really good computer system. I mean, a good home game system, a PC-based system, might be $2,000. Maybe a high-end workstation, whether it's Apple or PC-based, that might be $2,000 or $3,000. So, I mean, that's incredible when you think about it, how expensive this stuff was.
Yeah, absolutely. But it was amazing for what it did, and way less expensive than the alternative, which was having a mainframe or something in your basement.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Exactly.
All right, so great. Now you're writing the column. Tell me about how that went. I mean, did you come up with the ideas? Did they assign you things? Did you get feedback from readers? Did you get to go to trade shows and conventions? And tell me some stories about writing Outpost Atari.
So if I remember correctly, a lot of the columns in creative computing, whether it was radio TRS-80 or Apple or Commodore, whatever it was, a lot of them were very programming based. In fact, actually, that's obviously where creative computing got to start. Here's some programs, you can type them in, you can do this, you can whatever. I was less interested because I had just spent 3.5 years working for that time-sharing company.
Yeah, what was the company? I forgot to ask before. The company you were with.
The company's name was Service Bureau Company. That was the actual name. And the reason it was part of Control Data Corporation, and they basically had, mainframes. They had IBM 370 158s, and Control Data or Service Bureau came about because Control Data, sometime, this was before my time with that company, but I think in the early 70s maybe, IBM obviously was a big powerhouse in mainframes. And I think Control Data sued them, saying they had a monopoly. And as part of the settlement, IBM spun off the Service Bureau Company. And what's interesting, that was the name of the company, but that was really what it was as well. It was a Service Bureau. It was that's what they were called. So IBM spun off the Service Bureau Company to Control Data as part of the settlement. So when I was working for Service Bureau, I was a systems guy. So I wasn't a salesman per se, but I would assist the salespeople and do some light programming, both in the proprietary packages that they had, and also, believe it or not, I programmed in BASIC, and BASIC was kind of the glue that held stuff together, because when we used to go to companies that were our customers, they would have different kinds of data systems. It might be Sperry, or it might be, Univac, or they might be minis, it might be DEC machines, or who knows what. But so there's always the need to have some kind of interface between the company's data, whatever they had, and what the Service Bureau Company and what our proprietary packages had. And of course, we had the basics. We had a spreadsheet-like program, although it wasn't really a spreadsheet, because you actually did the modeling in one thing and had the data in another section. There was a database program. There was a forecasting program, stuff that businesses really needed to use. So anyway, I used BASIC to write programs in BASIC. The interface to different systems. So, given that I had done this kind of thing for a living, I really wasn't all that interested in doing it. I did play around a little bit on the Atari because there were some neat versions of BASIC, as you probably know, and it seemed like every 6 months there'd be a new version of BASIC that was even better than the last one. That would would have peaks and pokes and access to the fantastic graphics that the Atari had. So it was a lot more fun than just moving data around on a big system. But anyway, I wasn't that interested in doing programming per se in the column. I was more interested in writing about exciting things, what's new, what I thought were excellent pieces of software or hardware, that kind of thing. And actually, that's what led to. I think I lasted about a year with creative computing, but they really wanted me to focus more on the programming aspect, and I wasn't interested. So that's what led me to move from creative to A.N.A.L.O.G magazine.
Right. Okay. All right, then let's talk about A.N.A.L.O.G. You
so A.N.A.L.O.G is very interesting.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wrote the. I did most of my writing. Well, not. I did a lot of my writing for A.N.A.L.O.G. You're right. I did do I did a column called the End User. I think it was called the End User.
Yes. And
I did that because, again, I didn't mention this, but when I was at Bell Laboratories, I was a research psychologist. That's my background in human factors. So I'm used to doing, ergonomics and usability and interfaces and screens and all that kind of stuff. So I think I know both what I like and also I know from a professional point of view what makes a good program or piece of hardware or something. So I always wrote my columns, even my reviews from that point of view. That, here's why it's good. Here's some things that could be better, that kind of thing. So yeah, I wrote the End User column for A.N.A.L.O.G. I did a lot of software reviews. I didn't do much when I was a creative. I didn't really do much traveling. But when I met Lee Pappas at A.N.A.L.O.G, and we became good friends, and then from that point on, I went to. And again, boy, these were exciting times. I would, there was CES, the Consumer Electronics Show. I would go to that twice a year. There was the Comdex. I would go to that twice a year. So there were these 4 trade shows a year where, the industry was just incredible. I mean, there was so much excitement, so many things that were new and fun. I mean, I used to spend so much time just walking around those trade shows, trying to keep up with new stuff, meeting with the vendors, doing interviews. It was just several days of nonstop motion, and I get home and I just crash because it was just so much work. But it was fun. It was exciting and fun.
Nice. And then you eventually went to the dark side of ST stuff with the ST User column in ST.log magazine.
Yeah, and I very cleverly, the column I did for the ST.log magazine, I called ST User. So I thought that was rather clever at the time, going from End User to ST User. Right. But yeah, when the ST came out, boy, that was amazing, and I mean, I was used to, it's funny when, again, there's this whole home computing world that I was immersed in, but that wasn't my day job. My day job, I remember at Bell Labs, writing memos and whatnot, using VI, the visual editor, on a Unix system.
Sure.
And using what were called memorandum macros, which were, little things that were written so that you could actually do font changing and paragraphs and tables and whatnot. I mean, so all this, using, again, they were the people that maintained the computer systems at companies, corporations, universities, and whatnot. It was sort of a black art. I mean, they were the magicians. They were took care of all that stuff. And then they were the user who had a terminal and had access to some aspect of that. And at the same time, there's this whole home computer thing going on where people are they can't get this stuff fast enough. They can't get it into their homes quick enough. They're writing, they're playing games, they're learning new stuff, they're teaching, there's educational, all kinds of educational stuff. It was just amazing. I'm still amazed when I think back.
Yeah. So you were. I didn't realize you were still working at Bell Labs while you were writing, being a columnist. That's awesome.
Oh yeah. I spent. I was at Bell Labs for about 8 years, and I was that was my day job, and I was doing this, writing for magazines as a freelancer.
Nice.
Did
you do your writing on an 800, or what was your?
Yes, as a matter of fact, my writing, I used the 800, and eventually when, as you know, there were one of the nice things about the Atari was that there were so many add-ons and so many things that were built upon it. So I remember. Around 1983 or so, there was an interface called the ATR 8000. Have you heard of that?
Yes. Yeah, the CPM box.
So, yep, exactly. It was a CPM box. It used the Atari as a front end. I had a bit 3 80-column board in my Atari, so I could have a 80-column screen. I didn't get a green screen. I had an amber screen, and I was also going to graduate school, working on my second master's degree in 82 and 83, and I wrote my thesis using the ATR 8000. So I mean, it was a legitimate system. I learned WordStar on the CPM on that CPM box. But before that, my favorite for writing for magazine articles and whatnot, my favorite was Letter Perfect by L.J.K. Because they had an 80-column version of that, and they were like doing stuff in 40-column. It always seemed sort of it was difficult to see, and it was it wasn't a little bit fuzzy, and it didn't seem like as professional or serious as an 80-column screen. So I had the 80-column, the 3 80-column board in my Atari. I had L.J.K. Letter Perfect, and did all my writing using L.J.K.
Nice. Then what? I mean, you're writing for A.N.A.L.O.G, you're writing for ST-Log. I was going to ask why you didn't write any books, but I think I know the answer to that. You had a day job and you were getting a PhD. You seemed like you were pretty overextended already.
Right. So I was kind of busy, and so I when I stayed with A.N.A.L.O.G for many years, and then when Lee sold A.N.A.L.O.G to LFP and moved out to California. I think A.N.A.L.O.G pretty much stopped either thereabouts or soon thereafter, and ST-Log, I'm not sure how much longer ST-Log lasted, but then Lee was starting.
I don't have the exact dates, so.
Yeah. Right. Then Lee was starting a laptop computer magazine, and he asked me if I was interested. I said sure. So I ended up writing for the next, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years for a PC laptop. Again, doing reviews, doing a column, doing trade show reports, what's new and exciting, that kind of thing. So there's really quite a progression from the Atari 800 through the ST, and I did some other writing throughout the 80s. I bought a Commodore 64 to see what that was like, and I wrote a few reviews on some Commodore software. In the early 90s, I bought a Macintosh. I bought a few Macintoshes. I started with the original Mac, and then bought a color version, and I ended up teaching at a local college for about 2 years as an adjunct, teaching some design application classes on the Mac. So I was playing with that, and then of course I kept following PCs. I remember Dell, going way back. Dell used to be called PCs Limited, I believe. So I had a PCs Limited machine. I got a 286. I got a 386. I moved up to, I just every couple of years it seems I got an upgrade to another PC system. So I had a lot of computers of various ilks in my basement that I used at various times.
Nice. And how do you keep yourself busy today?
Well, I ended up being after I left Bell Labs in the late 80s, I went to another part of AT&T for another 8 years as a project manager, and stayed with AT&T for, I guess, until just about when they spun off their manufacturing, Western Electric, to Lucent. And then when I joined Lucent, I got outsourced to IBM. So I stayed in my same job, but I then ended up working for IBM for another, I guess, about 6.5 years. And then for the last almost 10 years, I've been working as a project manager for a financial services company, software development.
All right.
So it's interesting, I hadn't really thought about this, but, my first real job was computer time sharing, mainframes, software and hardware, obviously, but mostly software, application stuff. And that's where I am today. So it's a sort of an arc, I guess.
The pendulum swings back.
Yeah.
Nice. So you mentioned your basement. I'm wondering if in your basement you have any of the newsletters for the Jersey group, or anything that is interesting that the Atari world needs and hasn't seen. I mean, we already have all the analogs and creative computing scanned, but some of the newsletters and what do you have that's interesting that you want to share?
So I was actually rummaging around over the weekend. I couldn't find the newsletters, but I think I do have somewhere every Jersey Atari Group newsletter from all the times I was doing it, which was about a year and a half. So that's somewhere around. I still have an Atari 800, which I haven't turned on in who knows how long. I have a 800 disk drive. I did a 810 disk drive. I still have that Commodore monitor. I have an Atari 800 XL, and I found a couple odds and ends. I found what seemed to be a koala tablet.
Koala pad.
And the software wasn't there, but the tablet was there. And I think I found a Atari tablet. This is the black one, the black and gray one, I think it was.
Yeah, the touch tablet.
Yep, touch tablet. And I like to try different things back then. And one of the things that I had and I think I wrote a review for some magazine, I forget which, was a voice synthesizer. And I think I found the manual for that, but the synthesizer's long gone. And the other thing I found was, when the Atari, late Atari 8-bit, and then especially with the STs, they got heavily into MIDI, the musical interface, visual interface. And, a lot of bands use the Atari STs as part of their setup for concerts. I remember getting a MIDI interface for the 800, and I think I found the packaging it came in, but the actual MIDI interface was nowhere to be seen. So these are the kind of things that rumble around. And I found a couple of joysticks. I found a little. I think I found a thumb wheel, a Atari trackball. But a lot of it had, even though it was in boxes, there was a little bit of dust on it. It has not have been used in many, many years.
You had all the toys, though. Sounds like.
Oh yeah, I loved playing with the stuff. I loved writing about it and sharing, what was neat and what was exciting, and that was such a fun time. Boy.
So what haven't I asked you about that time that I should have?
Well, there were so many interesting companies during that time, and I'm thinking, what, as far as software goes, what were looking back on it, what were the class acts, at least in my opinion. So, Electronic Arts, when they came out with the 45 RPM record size software packaging, things like Archon and Mule and 7 Cities of Gold, the whole thing, and they started marketing their game designers sort of like rock stars. In fact, I interviewed quite a few of them. Dan Budden, and I'm not sure I can remember others, but there were several that I interviewed that were very interesting people. And so Electronic Arts was really started a whole new thing, a whole different thing.
Yeah, I found an interview you had done with Bill Budge.
Okay.
Online,
yes.
Which is interesting because I'm trying to interview Bill Budge now, and I haven't been able to get a hold of him. But
oh, really?
It's probably easier back then.
Did he do? Was that Pinball Construction Set?
Yeah, that was his big title.
Okay, all right. I pulled that out of the past. And then, of course, Infocom with their text-based games, and just, oh man, the packaging that Infocom did. Having the mysteries and the things that came with the package. I mean, it really made it more than just a computer game. It made more of an experience. That was fantastic. And then you had companies like Batteries Included. What a class act. I mean, Michael Reitman, I don't remember who, Rush Wetmore. I'm surprised I remember some of these names. Their word processor was excellent. They had combination software. I think it was called HomePack. That's one of the things I found over the weekend was the dongle from either HomePack or their word processor, which I forget the name of. So Batteries Included, and then of course, as far as the programming tools go, OSS. I mean, wow, talk about serious programming tools. They just one thing after another were just fantastic. I mean, I used some of them, I reviewed some of them, but the people that were really into that, boy, you really couldn't do do much better.
Yeah, Action and Max 65 and all those.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. And then as far as the Atari itself goes, the Atari computer, it's interesting because it was really, I think of many of the many computers that were available at the time, whether it was the Apple, Apple II, or Commodore, or Radio Shack, whatever. I think the Atari was less intimidating to people because it kind of looked like a typewriter. It was sort of a friendly shape. It was all modular. Unless you really got into it, started swapping boards and getting RAM boards that had more than just the 8K and stuff. But you had the cartridges, you had the system boards, the peripherals could be plugged in a serial bus, with the Atari connector. So I think that was one of the things that made the Atari a success, and of course the graphics. I mean, that's what sold me on Atari over Apple was just the fantastic graphics and the fact that you can access them with basic programming language. You could, well, if you want to get more serious, which I never did, as far as assembler and stuff like that, it was just fantastic. But I think if I think about one thing that really captures that era is that it was exciting. It was exciting. It was fun. It was something new. It was something you could share. You could join a user group. There were all these magazines. There was, Compute, Antique, and Creative, and A.N.A.L.O.G. I mean, there's, you know as well as I do that there were just a lot of information out there, a lot of stuff to learn, a lot of stuff to have fun with and share. So the one question you didn't ask me, which I was thinking about just now, is what, how did I misspend my time the most? That's the way of saying it.
How did you misspend your time the most?
Well, playing Choplifter and Miner 2049er. If I could recapture all the hours that I spent on those two games, allegedly, I'm just doing research here for my review, but I spent hours and hours and hours playing those games. And many others for that matter as well. I mean, Synapse, what a great company. I remember one was called, I think it was Necromancer. That just seemed to have a lot of depth to it, and the graphics were great, and the sound was great. Spent a lot of time playing Necromancer as well. But I mean, you couldn't help but want to do stuff because it was just so much fun.
If you could send a message to the people who read your columns back in the day and who are listening to this interview right now, what would you tell them?
Well, I would say if you read my columns back then, thank you very much for reading and supporting me. I did get a lot of mail, a lot of questions, a lot of comments. It was an entire community, and it sounds like I don't know too much about the 8-bit world right now. I've been away from it for so long, but it sounds like you have kind of that sense of community now. And I would just say, that's what it's all about. Keep it up. Share, enjoy, learn from others, do stuff yourself. Just enjoy yourself.
Great. Good answer. If someone wants to contact you, do you have contact information that you want to share? Because I had a hard time finding you.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, sure. My email is Arthur L at Yahoo.
Okay.
So that's fine. If people want to contact me, I'll be happy to respond and to the best of my memory. Again, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, it sounds like a lot of people are interested in
Yeah, it's a
8-bit
nice
stuff.
nice little community.
Is there a ST community as well, as far as you know?
As far as I know, I'm really an 8-bit guy, but if you feel like looking, if you go to AtariAge.com and then click on the forums, you will see there's forum message boards for 8-bit and for ST and also for Atari portfolio and Jaguar and Lynx and stuff. And yeah, the 8-bit community's pretty humming, and as far as I know, although I'm not really part of it, there's a busy ST community as well.
Oh, okay, great.
I think that's all I need. Thank you so very much.
Okay, well, thank you, Kevin, for contacting me, and just want to say it's just been fun talking to you and thinking about all this stuff. And as I talked to you last week, I've been thinking about what could have been, what could have been if things didn't turn out the way they did. With Atari, Atari corporate not really realizing what they had and the way that A.N.A.L.O.G handled it and everything else. I mean, who knows where it would have ended up if things had been slightly different. But I guess we'll never know.
Yeah, it could have been a very different world.
That's true. Okay.
All right.
Okay. Well, thanks, Kevin.
If you enjoy these interviews and would like to contribute something, I encourage you instead to donate to one of our favorite organizations, the Internet Archive, at archive.org. The Internet Archive is a nonprofit digital library with the stated mission of universal access to all knowledge. They've done incredible things to preserve computer history, including hosting thousands of programs in an in-browser Atari emulator, creating the Wayback Machine, and offering full-page scans of countless Atari computer books and magazines. Make your tax-deductible contribution at archive.org/donate.